of our several guests tonight. Kansas School District, Amber Shield.
Thank you.
Rather early on the agenda, so bring your family. And 10 more
Perfect.
puppies.
Yeah.
I think you should
I'm
first,
down to
I think
one.
you should first report on how many puppies you had and how many you have left.
We had 10 and we're down to one. Like the second to last one just left today. But we're keeping one, so it's been an experience.
Bad experience.
It's been fun, really. But I'm kind of glad it's over.
How long ago were they born?
They were 8 weeks. They were 8 weeks last Friday, so yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I'm glad it's over. So. Okay, so just an update on Brighton.
Oh my heavens, there's a face I recognize. How you doing?
Oh, we're going out to bid. What did I write? We are going out to bid for the main.
Press that button.
Oh, press the button.
Thank you.
Oh, green. Okay. We're going out to bid for the remainder of the building. We did one small bid over the summer. It was for all the groundwork for the baseball, softball field. That came in under $5 million, which we're glad about. We were
5 million under.
Well, no, it was like 4.5 million or something, which we thought it might be as high as 8. So we were happy that came in lower. And then we're going out for bid in about the next month. And it'll be the whole rest of the building. So it's like we'll be able to lock in all the costs right now for the next 3 years. So it'll be good, I think. I'm excited about it. And thank you for everyone who attended the groundbreaking. It was really fun. I'm sorry you missed that, Mayor. It was really nice. It was great.
You got his bangle, huh?
I did, it's on my desk.
Oh, you did? I know, those were cool statues. Yeah, and I have the orange and black striped hat. The one I need to put a little place in my garage for. Anyway, so that's exciting. We are trying to get, and I don't know if our communications has contacted you yet. We're trying to do like a monthly update on the construction, and we want that to be able to go out to patrons. So we're kind of working with construction, with Hogan Company, and then one idea was just to maybe get it in the city newsletter so that we have like a little piece like every month on maybe what's happening. Just so I think it's good for neighbors to know anyway what the next part of it is.
I think the whole city is concerned.
Yeah, so that's what we are gonna try. We have sent out, I hope it's gone out by now. I don't know, Scott can maybe tell me, there was supposed to be like maybe a postcard taken to all the neighbors. They were gonna walk that around with information about parking. And did you get anything yet?
If I did, I didn't notice it or see it.
Well, it's probably gonna be this week then, because they've been working on that, so. And then parking, we were talking about that a little. Hopefully, that is going well. Have you guys seen any issues, or do you have any feedback for me
We're starting to see creep.
into your parking lot, or where?
Well,
The Robbie
that day was
response
week there.
I mean, there's creep that's at the church, it's up at, between the middle school and here, I know, everywhere.
Just on the
Well,
street?
The rec center, well, yeah, there were some people on the street, but the rec center, the skate park parking lot isn't full. So maybe you
Oh.
get that back down to the principal if that's one.
Okay, it's not full, okay.
But I noticed, I've been getting pickups and drops offs at my house, which didn't happen very often before. I mean, that's not a big deal, it's not a concern. I'm signing no parking, so that can happen, that's different. Yeah.
Okay, and then you're just ticketing if you see,
Yeah, so far so good. We have no complaints. We get it.
yeah.
We'll just have to work through it. And so if it becomes a problem, we'll start doing this. And we have a good relationship with your administration over there.
Good.
We'll work through it. We're good. All good.
Okay, that's great. I did drive around like the first day, and I was bracing myself for like some mad emails, and I got none, so,
No, they're not in the neighborhoods,
yeah.
so we're good. Well,
Oh, that's good, because I know that's not fair to the neighbors, so.
Well, within that first couple of days, both the neighbors to the east of me had cars. One ran into the yard and the other got some fence. So hopefully that will just be an aberration.
I hope so.
I don't know
That's too
why
bad.
those two just happened to get that.
It's weird. Oh.
I think there's enough information out that construction is coming.
Mhm.
And therefore, many people anticipated some change, and then parking was an issue.
Yeah.
We'll continue to monitor and be sensitive.
Yeah, that's.
Well, they did a pretty good job pre-staging everything.
Yep.
Well, I mean, they worked with the schools, the churches, us,
Yeah.
everything, so he did a
Yeah,
good
so
job.
thank you, yeah, and thank you so much for allowing the faculty, some faculty to park here. That
All
helps.
this together, so.
Yeah, every little bit helps. So thank you. Then our district is starting a campaign that's just on student safety. And this whole year we'll be doing it, we'll be sending out postcards to parents, just talking about, you know, the different drills we're doing and just the different safety measures we have in place. And it's called Think Safe. And it's like this little theme is welcoming, secure, prepared. And there'll also be emails, well, not emails, sorry. It'll be on our website. And if you guys want, if you guys would be interested, we could try to have this sent to you guys so you are aware of like what we're sending out, if you'd like that.
Kind of today.
I will. Okay, then I did talk to the district about the retention basin, and they were surprised it hadn't been done already, so I told them it hadn't, because I saw it, but it wasn't. So he said they're gonna do the basketball lines soon, and then they still need to measure for pickleball, and see like how they can fit it in there and stuff,
Existing
so.
lines, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it was kind of good, I followed up with him because he wasn't aware of that, so. Then also, I just want to make sure you guys know that, I think you probably do, the golf tournament fundraiser for the Canyons Education Foundation is September 19th.
The Wasatch.
Up at Wasatch, yeah. That's gonna be fun, it'll be beautiful up there. Then just the first day of school went well. We do this really fun thing, you guys probably saw it, where we have, at least for elementary and middle school, the red carpet. It's just really red plastic, but we like have a bunch of people out to welcome the students, and it's just really fun. And they, for the most part, seemed really excited. So that was great. There was a smooth start. Enrollment is about the same, so we haven't really lost or gained a lot. And then also, just final thank you so much for the Teacher of the Year luncheon you guys did.
Yeah, that
was very
that
nice.
went really well.
The school
Yeah.
kids are parking lots of stuff.
So we really appreciate that. And that's all I have. Is there anything you guys want me to take back, or?
Hey, council, any comments, feedback? New school year?
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for working with our situation over there.
Gotta do it. And wish the football team well, they're struggling so far, but
There are, and just like, just one more thing is like, there's a tennis match going on right now, like Brighton is playing Alpha soccer right now, and then I think it's a home game this Friday for football, so.
lots going on.
Oh, this Friday?
Yes, please have that.
Well, is it?
Yes.
Oh, well, it's just sitting here. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, thank you. Just, yeah, keep in touch with us if you have problems.
Well, and vice versa, and I think the next couple of years will be a challenge, and especially next summer especially.
Yeah, so is the roundabout still on schedule for next summer?
As of right now, yeah.
Okay.
Designed this fall and further input, and next summer, that's my understanding.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. Okay, well, I will let you guys keep going with your meeting. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna take this, I'll leave that for the next person.
Thanks, Amber.
Thanks. I always forget my things to take.
Yeah, okay. Jared, you want to come up to the table, and
Absolutely.
Paul, you want to join, or whoever? Good to see you run your better half.
Maybe pass a few down this way and a few that way.
So we've got Jared here to give us a quick update on, we're 2 weeks out from Saturday. From the PD standpoint, we're well on target to handle the event like we've done in the past. Murray's on board, they're going to provide us 18 officers this year. So it's a big undertaking, but they've supported it, and I'll turn it over to Jared.
Great. Was anyone left without an agenda? No. Great. Okay. Not too much by way of update. Looks like Dan is pulling up the course map here if there are any questions or specifics that we need to dive into. Thank you, Dan. We are officially, I'll say it again, the second biggest event in the state, so congratulations to Cottonwood Heights for hosting that. Still behind St. George, but we are firmly in second place and ever gunning for that first spot, so give it a few more years. Wanted to begin just with an update on the outreach to the stakeholders that we reach out to. So Union Park Center obviously is the host of our finish line, has been notified. We've been working with them, and they are taking a sponsorship spot at the event this year. So everybody down there in terms of parking is aware of what will be going on. Same with the Old Mill Golf Course. They do have the tournament on race day, just like we've had in the past, which actually helped us quite a bit because they have all of their golfers arrive quite early in the morning, and we aren't dealing with folks coming in and out multiple times during the day. They just stay there for the duration of the tournament. We've worked with the folks at the post office, and Chief's been very good about, I believe it's Highland, where we let the mail carriers cross. So no changes to that. And then UTA, FedEx, UPS, other folks that need to know how to get around town have all been notified and made aware of the plan. In addition to that, we've done our pounding the pavement effort earlier this month. Alec and myself and Clark spent some time pounding the pavement on all the businesses on Fort Union itself or close to it. In total, I believe it was about 175 to 200 business owners or managers that we spoke with. Protocol there is to have a conversation with whoever we can, preferably an owner or a manager at the business. We outline all of the timelines, the traffic impacts, everything that they can expect. We leave a little pamphlet of information with them, and then obviously invite them to participate in the advertising opportunities that we have available. So that includes booths at the expo and at the finish line, Facebook posts, email advertising, things of that nature. We are happy to report that we had 31 businesses this year take advantage of that free advertising, up from 24 last year. So we hope to have that increase year after year. I did want to pause and ask if there are any specific concern, any businesses that the council wanted to bring up to make sure that we had checked in with.
Just the same one I've always had, Big O Town.
There you go. And Alec, I believe you were.
Me and Scott are good friends. So.
Is he okay?
Yeah, he's okay. He understands what's gonna happen, and
Okay.
it is good.
So that's, yeah, that's been sounding sad. Blue Lemon's another one.
I talked to their manager, he's aware of what's going on. They actually,
Blue Lemon is one of the
They're putting
31
in
That's
actually.
what I thought, because
Yeah.
the first couple of years they said it was destructive to them, and by contacting them, that's the
yeah,
cost, yeah.
they put in an ad and they're hoping runners come eat afterwards. So.
Okay, okay.
We do it with more hair design?
More hair design. Yes, that was yeah, absolutely.
They have 3 or 4 people running it.
Yeah, we gave discounted entries to their employees this year. So
I guess I had a question, I don't think I ever heard back from you or Paul, but my concern is still the Wasatch Boulevard and the length of time that you are closing down the northbound lane.
Let me address that if I could. I did take your question back to UPD. We met a couple of weeks ago as a group that are over in charge of the route. UPD is in charge of the intersection of 62, and we have a problem there with runners going both directions. I ran the question past that group, and there's just no way we can accomplish that safely. We do give Granite, their trucks, some preference to go across there because they're a business that's affected, but to open that Fort Union northbound, or excuse me, Wasatch northbound from Fort Union earlier than 11 o'clock, I just can't do it safely. And UPD is actually in charge of that intersection, and they see it as a big safety issue as well.
But I think I was asking underneath the tunnel.
Oh, so
I guess I would say, it sounds like we can't make a change this year, but if you want it to be the biggest and best marathon, I think we really need to take a hard look at this issue for our community and utilize alternative routes. And I don't know that I need an answer today, but I think that
I think
so part of the issue is, though, the traffic at 62. So without changing the route completely, that's the thing that dictates when we can open up Fort Union and the intersection of Fort Union and Wasatch. So it's that control at 62 and the old Wasatch Connect. We just can't open that any earlier and give preference to runners and get them across safely at that intersection. So I just can't open up northbound Wasatch to Fort Union any earlier.
In other words, it's the.
Well, I guess I don't want to hear an answer. I want next year for you guys to think about what you could do differently to maybe figure it out. I don't want to hear why we can't do it this year. I want to hear about what maybe can we do next year. Because I just keep hearing a lot of we can't. I think we're smarter than that. I know we're smarter than that. And I think that you'll have a whole year to think about it. I just get a lot of calls about this from my district.
You've already had calls this year
Yes,
since the mailer went out?
I met with somebody for 4 hours, well, not 4 hours, for an hour at my house trying to figure out how to help you on this issue. So I have people coming to my house trying to figure the issue. It's that important to them. And I don't know how many people have their residents come to their homes, but it's.
But I think it's a fair question that this year's set, and as we, any year, do a wrap-up at the end, that wrap-up, we put that as an issue for discussion and look at. I mean, there's precedent where I've seen that happen, and that's how Moab does it, but Moab does just a half, so it's one direction, doesn't do direction, so it's something going into next year we all look at and agree to recommend a change or agree diplomatically to disagree or not, but we all look at it, and that's a valid question. And, Jay and I have had a conversation even this week about that, so I definitely planted that seed as something I look at, but this year we're set down, I talked about this week.
Sure. And I don't mean to discount the conversation. It's honestly something we've looked at for multiple years, just because it would cut down on our costs as well. It's something we've always wanted to do, is just figuring out a way to be able to do it without impacting the race such that it becomes a non-competitive event, a non-attractive race for people to do.
What's the control that you do at 6200 South? What is the route they run up to that? Do they
So
have to go to
it's-
that intersection, or they don't?
So it's northbound on Wasatch until you reach the old Wasatch Boulevard. They go up Wasatch Boulevard to about, 40?
Just past the golf course.
Just past the golf course. They turn around and come back, recross the same intersection, and then come southbound on on Wasatch to Fort Union, and west on Fort Union. That's the marathon runners. The half marathon
Right,
goes
right.
straight
No,
across the
so-
intersection.
So they're going up, but they're basically
Yeah.
staying up that east side of the road, but they do go through that intersection, I guess, what you're saying,
Twice,
they come back.
up and back.
And currently they come up, go this way.
Yeah.
So on the way up, they stay east, and then when they come back to the light, that's when they cross over Wasatch.
So we will definitely look at it. I'll see
Again, I
what we
think
can
that
do.
was
Clockwise, if they get clockwise and go on to the
This is, as a wrap-up, we put that to file.
Sure.
We can have meetings throughout the
Yep.
year, look at it.
Easily we can do it. We'll take a look at
Yeah,
it.
that's
Sure.
it.
And Mike, Christine, maybe you want to meet with whatever group you were talking about, so that might be.
Let me take it back to the wrap-up and see what we can come up with, see if there's some alternatives, put our heads together and see what we can come up with.
I think an understanding, sometimes people don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. And
Sure.
that helps, so.
I always forget, remind me of the revenue stream, so you donate some to the foundation, what's that amount?
Correct, so that's $1, so this year it'll be about $5,000.
Okay, and then the city, what do we get?
So there's a sponsorship package that we put together, and I may even have it on my files, but it's essentially our presenting sponsorship package without a few of the benefits such as having the name in the title. So it came from a 2015 thing where Lexus was a presenting sponsor of the event, dollars, and replicated it for the city. So that package includes, it's logo placement, it's write-ups on the website, it's a welcome letter from the mayor that's going out this week,
But we do not
city
get the
branding.
cash, no.
So the $5,000 is what, the donation that? our
It is the
community
cash
gets?
donation too, yes, correct.
And we designated that to the foundation, because we didn't really we don't have a 501c3.
We can let the community, yeah. But then too, the thing I'd like to better understand going forward too is economic impacts.
Mhm.
In Cottonwood Heights?
Yeah.
Not in the greater county boundary?
Well, for me, I'd like to know both. I mean, primarily it's the city, but, if it's.
Right, and we do have the one that was done by the county, by Visit Salt Lake. To your point, that is for the county. And if you had someone that was that you would recommend to do one for the city, we'd be happy to fund such a study.
I think the University of Utah has a group that could do that for you. I'd be happy to give you that information.
Sure.
Yeah,
That'd be wonderful.
okay, go ahead, Jared.
Great. On to number 3, so the EDDM stands for Every Door Direct Mailer, went out last week. We email everyone within the routes on the zip code that will be impacted or that are near the event. Some of you may have received it this week already in your mailboxes. It has led to some good chances to connect directly with residents. Alec was on the phone for, was it an hour and a half? With one resident and her husband last week. Had some good things come out of that call, some course marshal hours that are going to be paid for by us, and we're putting out some extra signs in the neighborhood. That's exactly why we send this out, is just to get feedback from that and then act accordingly with signage or course marshals, volunteers, whatever it needs to be. We did take out the full page ad again in the journal, and are working with, per the request of the council, the recreation department to notify the parents of the sports leagues. Any update on that, Alec?
There's nothing really scheduled during that time. So.
On those fields?
Yeah, they did, he is gonna send out an email, just overall to all the coaches and staff, let them know that it's going on, but they try to stay clear that weekend, because they know what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Do you send it out to any of the surrounding, like Impact, any of the other clubs, nearby clubs? To let them know about it, like, so for instance, I always get notice through my listserv with my kids' soccer team about the Salt Lake City Marathon.
Mm.
So I just wondered if you can have the ability to find the listserv through Impact or the Sandy, like the Murray Mac, some of the other, because there are many of us in the community that travel outside to go to
Especially for
soccer
the
games.
competitive teams, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We could work with
That's-
Y, probably use soccer is probably the biggest one here.
Well, YSA's local,
Football
but
probably.
there's you know, if it's Sparta and some of those other competitive.
private clubs.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Could we make note of that and try to reach out? Thank you. That's a good idea. Okay, on to signage and traffic control. So the yellow signs are being deployed today, actually, today and tomorrow. Our barricade contractor wanted to get them out before the long weekend, so you will begin to see those. Per your request, sir, we're going to have the big Cottonwood Marathon added to the top of them. There were 3, I believe, that were missed, but all the rest of them, the big 4x8 ones, do have a big 4-foot thing on the top that says Big Cottonwood Marathon, so that hopefully people don't confuse them with city barricades. The rest of the bullet points on here on number 4 we've kind of discussed already. Essentially just doing what we can to create better egress out of the parking area. Once participants come out of the Union Park Center, we'll have some dedicated turn lanes open for them so that we have less of a cluster there. And then the last bullet point here on number 4, just kind of an FYI, we will be putting up that physical barrier, is what we call it, the visible surveyor's tape, along the north side of Fort Union in addition to the south side this year. Just another step to hopefully increase the safety there. Anything you wanted to add, sir?
No, we have an issue with people not realizing they can't go through the barricades, so that'll give us that visual deterrence.
Great. On number 5 here, I did want to extend the invitation, hopefully to all 5 council members, if you're willing to come hold the finisher's tape like we've done in the past. We would love to have, there's 4 different winners, so there's male, female, full marathon, half marathon. So if you're able to, I've listed the times here beneath number 5 when we would like to have you present, if you're willing. And then there's the phone number of our colleague Anna. It's that 720 number. You can just give her a call if you kind of want to just show up to where that big arch is right at the finish line. She'll be somewhere right there nearby, and you can just call her, introduce yourself, say that you're there to hold the tape, and she'll come find you and kind of put you in position for the photo ops there. So, and then finally, number 6, just a few miscellaneous things. This year we are getting a street sweeper for the finish venue. Chief, I don't know if I let two of you know that, but just FYI, that will be there as soon as the last participant heads out, or probably a little bit later, about 2 o'clock. We're going to have a street sweeper come in and just do that entire block of Fort Union between 13th and Union Park Ave. We had someone shoot off a confetti gun in the last couple of years, and that was not fun to try to sweep up. So we're going to have the pros come in and take care of that.
You won't have things all broken down by then.
No, we plan to kind of just push things off the road as much as we can, so that he can start at least on one end of it, sweeping the whole thing, and then kind of go from there. The donation to the foundation we mentioned, hopefully close to about $5,000 this year. I did want to ask where and when you would like us to come present that. Historically, we've done it in a...
City council meeting, just when you're through and ready, we'll contact the service area and schedule a time to
Okay.
go on, yeah.
Probably the best, we could really do it on the 4th.
Fourth Tuesday, September.
14th, yeah, that's fine. The end of September.
Paula, can we just schedule it?
Jared, can you also just give me a rough idea when you look at participation levels, the number of participants who are actually city residents?
Yes, I actually did look this up a few weeks ago. I think I was doing it for a sponsor who was interested to know how many live in the concentrated area. It was 115 or so runs in my mind, and that number obviously hopefully goes up. A lot of locals tend to wait until closer to race day to register.
How about the aid stations up the canyon stuff? Any of our residents who are participating and volunteering as well?
Yes, that's not, so Anna, that's listed here, she's the one who kind of manages all the volunteer groups, so I don't know off the top of my head who, it's the old faithfuls that keep coming back year after year, so if a city group has been involved in the past, odds are they're going to be back. We don't have too much turnover. And then finally, I did just want to make the council aware of a program that we have going called the Launch Team. It's a separate entity that we've set up that is a 501c3 nonprofit whose focus is on getting youth out and running. It's not a cross-country team, it's not a track team, rather it's kind of targeting kids who typically do not get involved in junior high or high school sports. It's kind of a couch to half marathon program. And it's been very, very successful. It's actually based here in Cottonwood Heights. The program director that we've hired is a resident here, and the largest group meets here. So we have about 70 plus youth and 20 volunteer coaches who meet. I believe it's a 13-week program, Lane, is that correct? Yeah, 13-week program that runs throughout the summer, and then it kind of culminates in these youth running the big Cottonwood Marathon. So we donate a free race entry to them. We have good shoe partners, Skechers and Hoka and a couple others who give free shoes to the kids. We teach them about nutrition and exercise and stretching and everything like that, just in an effort to kind of get kids off the couch and active. So that program is in its second or third year now, and we're excited to keep it going. Those are all the updates I had. Any other questions?
What year is this for the race in Colorado?
7.
7th year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, began back in 2012.
Okay.
I have a question about contact during the day of the race. Do you have a phone number?
I do. Let me give it to you now.
On
The best one, honestly, is Anna's, who's listed here on bullet point 5. She's the one who is permanently situated at the finish line, and therefore the most accessible. But I can give you mine as well.
Okay. Well, I think yours is an email, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a message.
Do you want us to put that on the website and/or social media?
The best thing, honestly, is to email in. Those all go to Anna and are responded to. Our typical response time is 2 to 3 hours for getting back to people that email in with questions and concerns.
Okay. Thanks.
Chief Watson, anything from your side with respect to this? Any concerns?
We're ready to go.
Okay. Anything else, Paul?
Nope.
Bobby?
You got it down to science.
That's nice. And then at the wrap-up, with Christine's point, we'll make sure.
We'll address it, put it right on the top.
Right point, we'll look at that.
And then, I'm sorry, what was the date that we should plan on for the donation?
September 25th.
September 25th. And that's at the 7 o'clock?
Yep.
Okay. We will be there with the check.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron, come on up. Yeah. We have police here, so it's safe.
Sure.
I was asked to bring a flash drive. I'm not sure if you
Actually,
could provide
the
it to.
presentation was sent to me and I have it here loaded
Oh,
already.
you do? Wonderful.
So I'll go ahead and hand you this clicker and you can advance it as you'd like.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Does everybody know Aaron get back?
I don't know everyone, so
Oh,
if you
wow.
don't mind going around,
Yeah,
I
right.
would appreciate
We'll start
it.
with,
My name is Mike Shelton. I'm the City Council District 1.
Christine.
Hi, Christine, how are you? Good to see you.
Mayor.
Mayor?
John Park.
Hello, John.
John Crackle.
Vice
Hatterley, Assistant City Manager.
Paula Malgar, recorder.
Metcalf, PR.
And the clicker guy.
Right there, that's the forward button.
Excellent, thank you.
And
The
Chief
one that's worn
Watson.
out.
Mike Watson.
Hello.
Hi, Ben McAdams. No, Robbie Rusan.
Nice to meet you.
Shane Topham, City Attorney.
Oh,
Matt Ship, Public Works Director.
hello.
Okay, and we have our planner back there.
Mike Johnson,
Planner
no
back
chair
there.
at the table. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director.
Nice to meet you. So may I pass
Please.
these around? I brought
Please.
copies of the presentation
Yeah.
for everyone to keep.
Thank you.
I'm happy to also send it well, you have it electronically, I'm certain we could
Let
get
me just
it.
introduce this
taken
real
out,
quickly.
please. Okay.
If I may. And,
Please.
The Conference of Mayors, it's been a couple months ago, Aaron presented this information, and I just, for my years being involved with the county, which was many, this is the first time I've seen someone take the opportunity to educate all of us outside the county about how and where some important opportunities are to collaborate, work together. So I really thought there would be a positive point to have Aaron come and really present that to the council. Yeah, so, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I don't want to take too much of your time, and I certainly don't want to read presentation to you, but I'll do sort of a high-level overview of the different funding opportunities. This was something, we were at the Council of Mayors and recognized that there was nary a face in the crowd that we knew. We had a lot of turnover in city mayors over the last elections, and so we felt like it was important to make sure everyone understood and everybody had equal access to opportunities, to county funding opportunities. And so we took the time to gather all of those opportunities into one presentation and presented that to the Council of Mayors. So thank you for having me here, and I'm happy to walk you through. I'm going to go a little bit by department where these opportunities lie. I'm Erin Litvak, the Deputy Mayor, Chief Administrative Officer. These organizations all fall within the portfolio that I supervise for Salt Lake County. So I'm going to start in the Department of Community Services, and I'll be completely transparent and upfront with all of you that this is the area I know extraordinarily well. I was the Department Director for Community Services for 12 years for Salt Lake County, so I'm very familiar with most of the funding opportunities and programs in community services. I'm getting much more familiar with the next area that we'll go into, but this is the one I can probably answer any question you have. The other, I may have to get back to you. So the current director for the department is Holly Yoakum. You have her, and we welcome phone calls, emails, anything we can do to support you and help you in working with the county, whether that's planning or an actual funding opportunity. We're happy and welcome those collaborations and those opportunities to work with our municipal partners. So I have actual phone numbers and actual email addresses for all of the folks that are involved in these programs within this presentation for you to have at your disposal. So Holly Yoakum is our department director. Robin Chalhoub is the associate director, and you'll see their contact information. Sorry, this is a little touchy. Moving into the next part, one of the primary funding opportunities within Salt Lake County, and this isn't necessarily for municipalities, but it does have some impact to municipalities that do have arts councils. This is the Zoo Arts and Parks tax. And I think you're probably all very familiar with this. This is a 1/10 of 1% sales tax that's authorized every 10 years by the voters of Salt Lake County. You can see here sort of a high-level overview that gives you a snapshot of how that funding is impactful to our community. And you'll see the different identified tiers within the tax. Tier 1, those are typically your large arts organizations like the symphony, the ballet. There's a maximum number of organizations that are funded in that category of 22, and that category receives 45% of the 1/10 of 1% sales tax. So the organizations apply through an annual application process and are funded, and there's an advisory board that meets and reviews those and makes recommendations to the county council. The other
That 21's not us. Well, not
22.
set members.
They are not.
It's
It
just a
is,
set number.
that's correct.
They just tend not to turn over rate.
That is correct. It is competitive, and they have to meet a minimum baseline of qualifying expenditures over a 3-year average to qualify into the Tier 1 pool. The other set, or the other organization that's not listed here specifically, is the zoo portion of that. And the zoo portion receives 16% of the 0.1% sales tax. That's a little more defined. There are 3 organizations that receive those funds. They're defined as a zoo, an aviary, and an aquarium, so it's pretty clear who those organizations are. Those funding, it's all outlined in state statute how those funds are distributed. The third area, or 3 of 4 area that we provide funding is Tier 2. Many of the city arts councils fall into the Tier 2 category. These are typically your smaller arts groups. They receive 9% of the tax. And we just had our council approve the recommendations for funding today. We had 178 applicants to this pool this year, and we were able to fund 176 of those organizations. So these can be anything from a small $500 grant for a one-time activity to the year to some of your larger organizations and some of your larger events that you might see in the community. Many of the arts councils fall, like I said, in this category, is the city arts councils that are connected to those agencies. The fourth area, and one that I think people are also very familiar with, but it happens once every 10 years because Salt Lake County, and in order to leverage the 30% of these funds that go to parks, the parks portion of this tax, we bond against those funds so we can maximize and get the most bang for our buck in the spending of those dollars. So we recently went through a process just a couple years ago. Mike was our Mayor Peterson. He's been Mike to me for 20 years, I apologize. Mayor Peterson was the chair of that committee for us this year, where we bring in a number of citizen advisory groups, other mayors from other communities, and it's a competitive application process for those funds. We bonded it through, and this always goes back out to the voters. So not only does ZAP get approved by the voters for the 0.1% sales tax, then we go out because we want to maximize and have the lowest interest rate possible from a bonding standpoint. We go back out to the voters for a GO. So our last round, I believe, Mike, was $91 million that we distributed to various agencies all across the valley for a number of large parks and recreation projects. So again, that happens once every 10 years. The other application processes happen on an annual basis.
What's exciting about that too, each time it goes out for voter approval, and the approval rate is...
It was 74% last time.
Yeah.
Very, very, very popular program. And I'm very proud of the staff at Salt Lake County. We had an audit by the state a number of years ago, and we had a shining audit. They did an audit statewide of all the different counties and cities that leverage the ZAP, or it can be done on a smaller version called a RAP tax, which is recreation, arts and parks. So that can be just for a municipality to do that if the larger county doesn't do it from a countywide standpoint. And we received really a clean audit. There were some of the smaller organizations and things had some findings in their audit. And our team really led out on helping those smaller organizations through some of those audit findings and clean up some of those programs. So we take excellent care of this program because we see it as a very valuable commodity to our community. In the next page, I'm just giving you, I know probably many of you have arts organizations or people that participate in the arts as constituents. These are just the application timelines and deadlines. I've provided them to you. When we presented this originally, I think, Mayor, we presented in June or July, and we were already past the deadline for the Tier 1 and Tier 2 applications at the time. So we've provided you the dates for 2019 when those applications will be done. So if you have an arts organization that's looking for funding, who's not applied to ZAP before, please send them our way, let them know of those deadlines, and we'd be happy to work with them and assist them through the application process. We also have here the Tier 2 application for 2019. And then we have a program, which is a very interesting program. It was actually originated, it was the brainchild, I call it, of Mayor Applegarth from Riverton. He was one of our 2 mayors that sits on the Tier 2 advisory board. And there was a strong interest, especially in some of our newer cities and our newer municipalities, to really establish a local arts agency within their community. This is difficult for smaller cities to get up and running, and so we provided this local arts agency advancement application. So they chose to set aside a portion of Tier 2 funding specifically to fund this opportunity for our municipal local arts agencies so that they can receive some training, some education, some support for staff in order to build their local arts agency programs in their cities to move those forward. This is a program that goes on at any time, so if you're ever interested in your community engaging in this process, we're happy to work with you. And Kirsten Darrington is our director of ZAP, and she'd be happy to help you facilitate through that process.
We used that a few years ago, so it had.
I couldn't remember all the cities that had participated, so
But
it continues.
That funding runs out.
Yeah,
after-
it's meant to be a 2-year period of time, and the idea is to help establish that organization, really get it up off the ground, demonstrate its value, and hopefully shift that to either a fundraising component or the city or municipality helping support as well. So I'm glad that you took advantage of that. That shows me that it's working as it's intended, and truly that was something that everyone in the Tier 2 board felt was a high priority, was establishing and maintaining these local arts agencies. Now, just so you have a timeline in mind, I know it seems like really far away, but I am always shocked how quickly this comes upon us. But ZAP will be up for reauthorization in 2025. I know, again, it feels like a long time away, but it's really not. I'd like to give people a heads up. A couple of years ago, we went back to the legislature to adjust the statute. As our arts and cultural agencies throughout the valley evolve and grow and change, and as our community becomes larger, some of the specifics that are outlined in statute need to be tweaked from time to time. So last time we did this, there was a pretty hefty debate amongst the arts and cultural community about whether or not they wanted to go back and ask for an increase of the 1/10 of 1%. We used to fund, when I started at Salt Lake County, in ZAP Tier 2, we funded 125 organizations. And I just mentioned that we funded 176. As our community grows, as our population grows, we have more and more of small arts agencies popping up throughout our entire valley, and we want to be able to support those agencies. So I anticipate that the possibility of that debate coming back and potentially approaching the legislature to potentially look at 0.2 of 1%, could come forward again before we go back out to reauthorization. So I just like to have that in people's minds to know that that could become a conversation again in the future. We would look in May and June to authorize to have it go before the county council for placing on the November ballot. We do an educational campaign through the county. What's interesting about every time the ZAP tax is renewed, what we see happen, which is always interesting because sometimes they're very competitive with each other, but all the arts agencies really pull together and they all provide funding and they go out and they educate the community and they educate their constituents on the importance of this tax for the stability and health and vitality of their organizations. So we as a government can only educate about what that opportunity is, but those arts agencies that are impacted, whether there's Tier 1 involvement, heavy involvement in Tier 1 for those larger agencies, but those smaller agencies also participate because that $5,000 grant or that $10,000 grant can be critical to their success ongoing and long term. So they all come together and kind of do their own real push about the education, and they do an actual campaign to vote in favor of the renewal of the ZAP tax. You'll see that happen, and then again that vote will happen in 2025. And just because I know it's important for cities to understand, then I like to sort of outline what happens after that reauthorization, because that following year is really when we move back into that cycle that I mentioned to you for the recreation funding distribution. And so right here is sort of an outline of what we do to go through that, and then we typically put that GO bond. So once the projects have all been selected, the amount of money that the county is going to go to bond for has been identified, the projects have been approved, then we go back out to the voters again the following year for approval of that specific list of projects by the community. So you have an idea of what that timeline would look like the year after that reauthorization. The next program that I'll talk about is a program that that really established out of a process that we did at Salt Lake County, and it's called the Cultural Facilities Master Plan. We were receiving, and I don't mean this in a derogatory, but just sort of these one-off requests all the time for different cultural venues to be built throughout Salt Lake County. And we didn't really have a solid understanding of what the demand or what the need was for cultural venues throughout our county as our population grew. And so we did something called a Cultural Facilities Master Plan, where we included all of our municipal partners, all of the arts and cultural organizations throughout the valley, in really putting together and mapping through what kind of cultural facilities we would need long-term to support our arts and cultural community, but also the citizens of Salt Lake County, no matter where you live, being able to engage in the arts, both locally as well as more regionally in the larger facilities downtown. That resulted in a master plan for cultural venues. One of the recommendations that came out of that venue master plan was for the county to put together a process that would open opportunity to anybody who is interested in building a cultural venue to apply to Salt Lake County for funding for that cultural venue. So there is no direct fund for this purpose, but what it did was, and I'll just say it the way that I think about it, is the people who had friends on the council were often the ones who got funded. So someone who had a connection, one of the council members sat on their board. They knew that they could come to the county for funding. No one else understood that there were opportunities to come to the county for funding for these types of things. And so what we've done is we've kind of pushed, everybody goes through that same process. Anybody that's looking to do any sort of cultural venue needs to go through this similar application process. So this is called the Cultural Facilities Support Program. This is the vision for that program. And then if you move on to the next slide, I think
you're about 3 slides.
Am I slide behind? I just keep talking. Right there. I double push the button. We have a couple of phases that happen. This is an annual process, so this happens every year at Salt Lake County. We have a Convention Facilities Support Program Project Review Team. So this is an internal team of our sort of county and facilities and arts and cultural experts who review applications, review scope, look at each submission, and then determine whether or not they're ready to be forwarded onto our board. So we have an actual board, and you can see the makeup of that board there. It was meant to bring in people who had expertise in all of these areas, but it was also meant to bring in folks who had a very wide depth and breadth of understanding of the needs of the arts and cultural community. So you'll see that the makeup of that board is very intentional to try to make sure that all people who are interested are involved in this process. And then that advisory board reviews applications and then makes recommendations to the county mayor and the county council for funding consideration. We do have a fund, and I'll get to that fund shortly, called the Tourism, Recreation, Culture, and Convention Tax. That tax is a tax that the county can fund publicly owned and operated cultural venues. Sometimes it has capacity for funding, sometimes it doesn't have capacity for funding. But we do have a pool of funds that's outside of the general fund. If it was always a request to the general fund, I can tell you I don't know that we'd be funding very many cultural venues because of the pressures on the general fund for public safety, behavioral health, and different things of that nature. But because this tax is specifically for this purpose, we can from time to time fund larger, sometimes smaller, cultural venue requests. And so those recommendations are made to the mayor and to the council for funding consideration, and the mayor determines at the time of his budget presentations which ones we can afford to put into the budgets and which ones we can't. So that's how that process works.
I'll tell you, as a member of that board.
Oh, are you a member now? Oh, I didn't know.
Representing TRAC. That's one of the most impressive groups I've ever met with as far as doing the homework and following set criteria and applying that to the selection process. It's pretty impressive compared to the old days, yeah. I give you that feedback.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, they look at everything from the need to the cultural vitality of the project to, you know, are your cost estimates actually correct? Yeah. I mean, they really dig into the details. Yeah, exactly. And then here's that process on an annual basis. So even if you missed this year, that opportunity will be there for anyone in the future and any year moving forward. I will say we've had many, many applications we've funded quite a number of those applications. So we've been very, very successful in being able to support other agencies' cultural venue development through this process and through this fund. So there are very few that we haven't been able to fund, and sometimes by the time we have enough money to fund them, they've raised money elsewhere, or they've abandoned the project, depending on what kind of support they were able to garner outside of just Salt Lake County. There are some limits as to how much you can ask for, those types of things. Typically, it's 50%, so the county wouldn't pay more than 50%. Valley Performing Arts Center. So if you've been downtown and been to the Rose Wagner Performing Arts Center, it's kind of modeled after that theater. It has a bigger 500-seat theater, a black box theater, and studio theaters. This is a slightly smaller version of that. There's a larger theater of about 400 to 450, a smaller black box theater, and then a small studio theater, and that's being located in Taylorsville. So that project has been funded. That will be a county-owned and operated facility, but we worked very closely with Taylorsville City. They donated the land and a number of other things associated with the facility. All right, this is that tax that I talked to you about, the tourism, recreation, culture, and convention
Can I
tax.
just ask a question about that?
Of course.
Tally works with our history committee, historic committee, and we have a really unique property called Old Mill. Maybe you've been there. Is that something that we could consider as part of this?
If you're looking to have it be a cultural venue, yes. If you're looking at a recreational venue, yes, but it would be a different process. So let's you and I talk, let's all of us talk about what the right way to approach a funding request for that project would be and work that through. I'll walk you through another way to get potential track funding. If it's not going to be a cultural venue, I'd have you go a different avenue. So I'd work with you to figure out what the best approach would be.
I'm not saying we have an idea.
No.
I don't want anybody looking at me funny. I was just.
But it could very much be.
That's why this is here, because I
That's
think.
why I want, that's why I'm here.
There are so many opportunities in the county, and you'll hear the rest of them, but we just need to have that in the back of our minds as things come across the council's desk.
And if we can make something happen there that's an asset to your community and added vitality, we'd love to help with those types of projects. So let's talk through, once maybe figure out what the vision of where it is and what you want it to be. That would definitely be an opportunity for us to explore together. Thank you. Okay, of course. This is the TRCC tax. So this is a specific tax that goes to Salt Lake County. It's made up of 3 different taxes. It's made up of the car rental tax, the restaurant tax, and a small portion of TRT tax. This fund primarily funds for the county. It actually at this point right now has very little to do with tourism, except for the fact that it supports all of the large regional cultural venues in the downtown area, except for the Eccles Theater. That is a self-sustained facility. The others are subsidized by county, by the TRCC fund facilities. So Abravanel Hall, Capitol Theater, the Rose Wagner, the Mid-Valley Performing Arts Center will be subsidized by that fund. And then the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art, which is a facility that's sort of attached, if you will, to the front of the Salt Palace. It's a free, open contemporary art museum to the public. Those are funded through this fund, and then a large portion of our parks and recreational operations and maintenance are funded through this fund. We do occasionally fund some convention facility type requests and things. Sometimes we'll fund things like the planetarium out of this fund, but typically those are self-sustaining. So the planetarium really operates on its own. It has its own tax line on the property tax assessment, and they've been able to utilize that to survive on their own, except for they've had a couple large capital expenditures that are reported through this tax. We've shifted the vast majority of our convention and tourism related expenses to the TRT fund, which is the tourism, it's the transient room tax, and it pretty much sustains the operations of the Salt Palace Convention Center, the Southtown Expo Center, as well as subsidize the Visit Salt Lake contract to do marketing and sales to bring conventions into our destination for economic development reasons. But this fund, every year we do tend to have some capacity to take outside organizational funding requests, and that's what this application is for. So we fund what we need to out of for the county facilities and operations out of the fund, and then we typically have sometimes between $2 and $3 million a year, approximately, to fund other projects. So those can be projects that come to us through that cultural facility support program that I mentioned earlier, or typically this process is most people apply for park and recreation related requests through this process. So this is the other process that I would steer you to if we were looking more at a recreational asset. But this is an annual process. It's managed by our county council. Brad Kendrick, who works in the council office, is the leader. You'll see his name, his contact information and phone number there. And those applications are typically due by August 31st, which I think is a couple days from now, where we have organizations that'll apply for funding for parks. Maybe the best example off the top of my head that I can give you of a project that's been funded out of this fund, Holiday City has been upgrading its city park. You're probably familiar with it, near their city hall. They've applied to this fund a couple of times for funding to help them complete that park. So city-owned and city-operated park, but we helped them with the development of that park to its completion. So that would be an example of the type of application we'd see here. Okay, now we're going to get into the stuff I'm a little less familiar with, and I probably won't talk nearly as much about. But this is a new department in Salt Lake County. It's the Department of Regional Transportation, Housing, and Economic Development. You'll see the director and the associate director there, Carlton Christensen and Stuart Clayson. And this has a number of different funding opportunities. And so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about each of them, but there's some social service stuff related to after-school programming and different programs like that. There are quite a few transportation opportunities here, as well as just an overview of some of the economic development opportunities that fall within this portfolio from the county. So the first is the County Active Transportation Implementation Plan. These are grants that assist with bikeway improvements within street roadways. So we have an amount of money, about $800,000 a year, that's dedicated to this purpose, and we take annual applications, typically around the summertime. They haven't quite nailed down their calendar quite as succinctly. Many of these are newer opportunities as others, but again, the staff contact on here, Helen Peters, she's fantastic. She will help support you through this application process and any questions you might have.
We just restriped and covered 2,300 east.
Oh, good.
Just finished 3 weeks ago.
Wonderful. Good.
You said within the roadway.
See, I like positive stories coming out of
We've got a
these.
lot of them, yeah.
Good.
Do you have any, is just the existing roadway width, if you needed to add a foot or two or something like that, does it cover that stuff as well?
It can, and striping is my understanding. So anything that would either expand the roadway or adapt the existing roadway to allow for active transportation opportunities.
There's not a lot of money for the county, so these are small projects.
Yeah, they tend to be. We're hoping to add to it at some point, but we're looking strategically at how to do that to increase the amount annually.
It actually focused the catnip grant a little bit more narrow in the last year.
Yeah.
Because we also have one kind of waiting to finish the bundle. That's part of what we're using the Ducombe King for.
Perfect.
Catnip grant.
Next one is the Corridor Preservation Fund. So this is a fund that is to assist cities with purchasing right-of-ways for future road development as your communities expand and your communities grow. To be eligible for these funds, you do have to fall within phase 1, 2, or 3 of the Regional Transportation Plan. Many of you are familiar with WFRC and the development of this plan that happens. And so just so you know what the caveats are around that, our project budget wanes year to year depending on available funding, but anywhere between $1.5 and $3 million annually. And again, not super set on the timeline there, but please call Helen and I'm sure she'll be able to fill you in on what that looks like. These are a little bit more of our social services programs. We actually have an opportunity for people to apply for funding. It's governments, private nonprofits, and schools can apply for fundings. We take applications next in the spring of 2019. This is a bit of a longer wait in between application cycles because we like to provide some stability to programs so they know that they can rely on funding year over year to be able to continue these after-school programs. Karen Wiley administers this program and a number of the others that are to come on here. Again, Karen is a very capable. She's been managing these programs for a long time, and she'll be happy to facilitate you through them and answer any questions you have. We also have, we take applications for cities or municipalities or agencies to have AmeriCorps volunteers in their agencies that the county pays for. There's an opportunity to apply for that asset as well. Community development block grants and emergency solution grants. These are done through an annual application process that typically happens. I believe both are in the fall, if I'm not mistaken. Double check, fall, yes. They typically happen simultaneously, and these are available, both of them, for government and private nonprofits. These are things that can help with, the CDBG are to help with low to moderate income housing projects and living projects, and then the emergency solution grants is to help with regain permanent housing. So these are application processes that we go through. The Federal Home Loan Bank Program. It's just a terrible name, I'm sorry. So this is, I'm just gonna read it because there's no other way to say it then. It's mortgage lending, economic development, and affordable housing with a special target to seniors and people with disabilities who are below 80% of AMI. So this is a pretty specific fund, but we take ongoing applications for this, and Randy Jefferson is our lead on this one. The Home Investment Partnership Program, so this is...
That AMI is countywide?
Yes.
So it's one number, it's not
correct.
Municipality.
That's correct. And then the Home Investment Housing or Partnership Program, this is really, we had a great presentation by Mike Gallegos and his team that talked a little bit about this program. This is a program that people can apply to. Nonprofit agencies often apply to help people in the community who want to be able to stay in their home but can't afford to stay in their home or can't afford to stay on top of the capital maintenance of their home. So things like roof replacements. We've done different types of asthma abatements. We've done mold removal. We've done, safety railings. If someone has found themselves with a disability later on in life, we've helped build ramps, different things like that to help someone stay in their home. So this is an opportunity for people to apply for those kinds of funds. The lead-based paint and lead hazard reduction program, this one's specific for governments and nonprofit agencies again. Again, this is to help people remediate lead paint in homes, and we have a program that helps people do that to make their home environment safer for their families. The social services block grants, these are, it's a vast array of different types of social service programs that are supported by this. Governments and nonprofit agencies can request. There's no income guidelines for this. This can fund anything from after-school programs to I think this one funds different groups like the Boys and Girls Club and things of that nature. It can fund things like the Road Home, any of those organizations that work to do social services programming for our population as they're needed. The Economic Development Revolving Loan Fund. This is essentially a loan program for people who might not be eligible for financing in another way. It's meant to be, my understanding is it's meant to be a bridge loan, so it's a short-term loan that helps people with a financing gap on a project for either manufacturing or tech. And so this is a program, but our economic development folks are really in tune with this. Patrick is an incredibly smart individual who will help you with this, and we really focus on job creation, jobs for low to moderate income folks, in targeting those specific areas within our population. The EPA loan program, I still don't get this program. My understanding, high level, is this has helped to remediate brownfield type situations, and so it's eligible for different groups depending on certain things. It can be a developer, it can be a nonprofit, it can be a government agency, but typically it's a loan for, And you can see the loan amount, and you can see the type of payback related to the interest. It's a very low income, low interest loan. So that there's two opportunities here, but it's meant to remediate and make buildable land in the end. And this you're probably more familiar with. This is the county's policy around tax increment financing. We partner with our municipalities all the time on different projects related to CRAs. This is just taking you to that policy and really sort of highlighting for you the things that are important to Salt Lake County when looking at those projects. I'm happy to forward you this policy. We're in the process of updating it now. I'm sure many of you are familiar that the state did some pretty significant changes to the statute last year. So we're updating our policy 1155 to reflect many of the changes that were in the state statute, and also sort of reinforcing some of the priorities of Salt Lake County around these types of projects. But you can see down on the bottom, again, it's that but-for test. It's creating new and high-paying jobs. We've added a component for high mobile capital investments. We're looking to, for those high capital investments, we're looking to minimize the geographic footprint that those take by incentivizing those through its private property tax. And then when you get into, we are always looking at clean energy, environmentally friendly projects are a high priority for us, as well as those that include the housing, the low income housing component that state statute now allows for. This is.
I'm sorry, can you just,
sure.
Something caught my interest.
Mm-hmm.
How, when you were talking about clean energy, I didn't quite understand how that connected with what you were talking about.
So this is probably related to specific projects more than anything else. So if you remember some of the conversation around some of the data centers that were looking to be incentivized, there was a high water use associated with those, as well as a high power use associated with those. The county was willing to contribute to those types of projects, but only if those issues were remediated from an environmental factor. So we didn't get too much into specifics in here, but we'd be looking at things like solar offsets for the footprint of the power footprint that those things take.
Okay.
We'd also be looking to ensure that the water and that the equipment that they're installing is the most energy efficient that it can be. Things of that nature is things that we'd be looking for to even consider approving a project like that. Does that help?
Right, I was thinking some, like a smaller development in the gravel pit.
Yeah.
If they wanted to do, solar or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, anybody who brings those things to us, they're gonna be seen very favorably by our council and by our mayor. So those are things that can definitely be like a little tick up that help with approvals for projects, for sure. But that specific issue is meant to address some of those issues that come with some of those type of economic development projects specifically.
Do you foresee one coming back again?
It's been cited, so no.
I know that.
Not
I just
recently.
didn't know if there were other ideas.
I don't know of anything that's in the queue at this point. But the county doesn't want to be someone who doesn't want to incentivize the right types of developments, but we want to do it right. We want it to be the right amount, and we want it to minimize the impact to our community. And so we felt with the creation of this policy that we'd be very clear at the forefront. If you want to receive tax increment financing in Salt Lake County, these are things that we're going to look at and we're going to consider, so know that coming in. We just want to be very transparent and very open what is a priority for us when it comes to these type of investments.
I'm gonna, a little bit of a loaded question.
Okay.
Parking structures.
Yes.
Does it fit into this category?
Parking structures sometimes are in economic development projects, not always in economic development projects. In the last legislative session, that's become a hurdle that we've been addressing and we've been foreseeing with different organizations that are asking us for tax increment financing. We don't typically like to support building a parking garage. I think you all know from your community, I feel like we came up with a kind of a creative way.
Yeah.
to fund parking, because parking is a real issue. It can be a real financing issue to getting a project off the ground as well. So in the last legislative session, and I wish I could remember the number, I wanna say it was HB 136, it could be SB 136. We were authorized, by the legislature to, to use some of our own money that we authorized from a tax-based percentage, that they gave us money to set aside to do, loans related to parking structures, so we could help bridge a financing gap in a project if it was related to the need for a parking structure. So there were a couple of projects in mind. I believe that we're funding the Cottonwood Heights project out of there now, which is releasing some of the previous transportation funds we had utilized for that.
Then you got one downtown and then.
The 422 money, I think was what we had sort of set aside to help with the parking structure in Cottonwood Heights. We've since replaced it with this loan fund that was provided to us by the legislature. So essentially, UDOT provided us a pool of funds for us to use long-term to do loans with municipalities on specific economic development projects that is then paid back through the tax increment. And then when that money comes back to the loan fund, then we can loan it to another project if there's a financing gap related to parking infrastructure. And so there were a number of projects that were in mind when that fund was created, so a lot of that money is already utilized and promised to specific projects. But then as those projects get online and the tax increment comes back, then that fund will be available for other cities and projects to apply to.
When does that amount of money become significant to then reloan out? Is it not for another 10 years?
It'll be a while.
Yeah.
It would be a while. So I can't remember what the payback structure is for each of those projects, but you don't start collecting until the project's off the ground and up and running. And so there will be a time period, but it's a zero interest rate loan that goes to these projects to help fund what is becoming more and more of a financing gap in getting projects off, really important, strong economic development projects off the ground. So they gave us a mechanism, and how successful it is yet to be seen, and whether or not they'll increase the amount of funding we have to do for that loan program is also yet to be seen.
SB 128.
Thank you, I think that's the one. I knew it was in the 120s.
As you had a project that came online, whatever that portion of that property tax for each year would be where this would start to be replenished.
Yeah, the increment
So I mean,
would come back.
the flow would start in, but
Take a while to build it up.
Yeah.
Correct.
It starts fairly soon, but that would be smaller over a
That's
15 or
correct.
20-year payback.
That's correct. And I don't know if you're running into that same hurdle, but that's one of the things that we're constantly running into is just as our community becomes more and more built out, that parking infrastructure gets more and more expensive, and it becomes sort of that hurdle to get across to get those projects up and off the ground.
Well, then tied to the issue of the canyons in our case.
That's correct.
Problematic.
Yeah, that's correct.
Anyway, thank you.
No, my pleasure. The last one I think you're very familiar with. This is the fourth quarter of the quarter. Not that that's not confusing at all. So this is the most recent funding that was approved. So on June 22nd, our clerk certified that the county would move forward with the implementation of this tax. Effective date is October 1st, 2018. The revenue estimate is $58 million. I think.
For this year?
For the first year. And the county will retain the funding for the first year, and we will go through an application process for the distribution of those funds within the first year. We will be looking, these are what it can be used for, so we could pay off transportation-related debt. If we so chose, we can do public transit projects that have regional significance, or we can do transportation projects that are regionally significant. We're in the process right now of working with our county council. COG just recently appointed the mayors who will sit on our board. What's a little confusing about all this, and I don't want to get too much into the nuances, there's the third quarter of the quarter. The advisory board that we've established is required by statute for the third quarter of the quarter, not the fourth quarter of the quarter. So there's no requirement for Salt Lake County to use that advisory board for the fourth quarter of the quarter. Based on conversations I've had with Mayor McAdams and the success we've always seen by processes like our cultural facilities support program process, like our ZAP recreation process. Being inclusive and providing that advisory council to the county in distributing those funds is something that we've seen a lot of success with and we think is very important. So I believe that that advisory board, even though not required to weigh in on the spending of the fourth quarter and the quarter, will in fact do so. So we'll be moving into this process really, really quickly. The board has just been created. We're working to finalize criteria that we'll be using to evaluate the different project applications that come in. There's also a lot of conversation. This quarter of the quarter is relatively flexible in its use. So trails are a component that can be utilized for this funding. And I think we may be looking to earmark some of those funds or dedicate some of those funds specifically to regional trail development. None of that's been finalized or made known, specifically at this time, but we'll be working with our municipal mayors to try to garner support for that. We think the regional trail network is very, very important to our long-term transportation needs as a county. And so that process will be happening in the near future. Again, we're just finalizing that. You will all be notified of that process when it's ready to be implemented. And that's the latest process that we'll be going through. And with that, I'm done talking about things. So I'm happy to entertain questions. I do my best to answer them. I'm definitely not an expert in everything, but I can find things out and I can come back, or I'd be happy to email any answers to questions that I'm unable to respond to right now.
But thank you very, very much.
My
I
pleasure.
think this is very helpful for new council members and old council members and as a city. And to me, it's just, of course, I have deep roots in the county, and I think the ability to partner and collaborate is win-win for the county and for our constituents. So we appreciate this information.
Thank
And
you.
taking time out of your, I know your schedule is crazy.
It's okay.
So we're blessed to have her here. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I think my phone number is on here. It is. My email and phone number are on here. Please call me anytime. The mayor has my cell phone number too. I'm sure he'll give it to you if you'd like it.
For a price.
But we're here to work together to solve the community's problems, so please, that's a genuine request for call me, and let's talk things through and see if we can figure things out. Okay? All right.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, all right.
Have a good rest of your
Maybe I
night.
could just ask one question, sorry.
Okay.
Do it.
They're all looking at me with
Well, I will tell you.
knives in their
Let me just-
eyes.
let me tell you on one thing. Since one thing I've done is since I became mayor, we have not had a formal Parks, Trails, and Open Space Committee. So we've created one, and actually we'll be formalizing that this evening and appointing those people. So this is valuable to them, as well as going forward with other things like that.
Wonderful.
So Christine will be leading that up as our liaison for that.
Wonderful.
So
Good.
when you talk about the earmark for trails, what's the magnitude of that?
I don't know that it will be an earmark. I think it will be a percentage.
Or
And I think, so keep in mind that in the first year, the county receives 100% of the funding, but in future years, 0.1 goes to UTA, 0.1 goes to the cities directly, and 0.05 goes to the county. So of that 0.05, I think it generates around $10 to $11 million a year, maybe 12.
I'm sure you can do it all.
I'm not entirely sure what percentage we've been talking about. I've heard 25% thrown around. Now, I can't guarantee
That's
that.
annual.
I can't, yes.
Okay.
But I can't
understand.
guarantee that because
It's
that's
not-
a policy decision that needs to be debated and had. I don't know that our county council aligns with that.
But it's a magnitude,
But
it's
it's a
not,
conversation that we're engaging.
it's not 50,000, it's probably maybe in the millions.
No, yeah,
Well,
significantly.
But I think Mayor McAdams.
And I don't know what we'll do with the 40 to 50 million we'll have this year. There may be even a portion of that that's earmarked towards trails. I just don't know yet. We're not quite there.
But again, the
It's a
mayor's
priority
very-
for us.
Yeah, it's a high priority for, it could be $2 or $3 million a year.
Well, and just so you all know too, I mean, we're actively talking about the potential of another open space bond. We did one in, I want to say it was 2006. It was one of the first things I did when I got to the county, which was in 2005. So we went out and did, I want to say, a $42 million Parks and Open Space bond in 2006. And I think we're contemplating potentially doing another one of those in 2020. has been the conversation we've had. Our council is very interested in that. They've actually been engaging us as much as we've been engaging them, which is a nice change. And so I think everybody's kind of aligned about potentially revisiting that issue, and that would have a countywide regional impact as well.
And how many of the current council members will be on the council in 2020?
I don't know that I can garner. Well, one for sure. Well, no, not even one for sure. I really can't say. A number are up for re-election this year. A number are running for other office. It would be hard to say. I think Max Burdick was just re-elected. Richard Snellgrove was just re-elected. Michael Jensen was just re-elected. Those three, I can probably guarantee in 2020.
But they're not the big open space people. They're not the ones leading the charge on that.
You know, Richard is very, very supportive. They're all supportive. I mean, we really have a surprisingly supportive council around this issue. Yeah, and the voters decide on this. This is a GO levy. This is something that we do, that the voters decide.
And voters across
We
the
had
valley.
unanimous support in our last open space bond. So I don't want to speculate what their positions would be.
But you have to get it too. You have
But
to get it.
Richard was not on the council in 2006. It was Court Ashton who actually was our lead on that. He was the Republican whip, I want to say, at the time. So Court Ashton was actually our lead on the Republican side. But Richard is an avid trails guy. He's a big hiker. He's super supportive in most issues. Michael Jensen voted for it last time, if I recall correctly. And I don't know that Max and Steve were on the council at the time. It could have been Marv Hendrickson and, gosh, I have to pull a blast from the past people out of my head. I can't remember. Mark Crockett may have been the other person, potentially. So we've had quite a bit of turnover on our council, but right now, you know, Ann Granato's up for re-election, Jenny Wilson's up for re-election, and Steve DeBryer up for re-election. So could be a different council, but I don't think there'll be too much turnover.
But I think there's a lot of support across the valley from constituents.
Absolutely.
of Open space and trails. I mean,
Yeah.
our local surveys, it's always a high level of support, and I think ZAP trades that out
Yeah.
as well. And
We just completed, we update about every 5 years our Parks and Recreation Needs Assessment. We recently just redid that, and Parks and Trails were top of the list again this time. So, high priority for our community for sure. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Thank you.
All right, referring back to your agenda,
It'll take 5 minutes.
you want to adjourn for 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay. Motion to adjourn for 5 minutes?
So moved.
Well, it's up to you.
Yeah, we'll adjourn for actually 10 minutes for a quick break and reconvene about 10:05. All right, we'll adjourn.